Welcome to the Grad School Femtoring podcast. This is Dr. Yvette Martinez-Vu, and I will be serving as your femtor, providing you with tips and tricks and everything else you need to know to get into graduate school. For the past 10 years, I've been helping undergraduate students get into top graduate programs in their field, and I'm really excited to share this information with you too.
All right, welcome everyone. I'm happy that I have someone returning today. I have another guest speaker who's going to be talking to us about how to be an ally among populations you don't identify with. And our guest is Emeline Beltran, who is returning once again. So I'm going to go ahead and read her bio, and then we'll just go straight into this great conversation. Emeline Beltran, who uses pronouns she, her, hers, is a second-year graduate student at Cal State LA. She is studying communication studies with an emphasis in intercultural communication. Emeline, like I mentioned, was previously on the podcast for episode 70, where she talked about her experience being a grad student with a disability. And today, Emeline has returned to share about her role as the programming assistant at Cal State LA's Dreamers Resource Center. She is a US-born daughter of Filipino immigrants, and her Filipina-American identity inspired her to work with diverse communities and specialize her master's degree in intercultural communications. As a US citizen who works with undocumented college students, Emeline will reflect on her experience and lessons learned so far about being an ally. So welcome back, Emeline.
Hi, thank you. I'm really excited to return.
So I am curious, you hinted at this before we clicked record, but I would love for you to start about kind of what motivated you to want to come back and to want to discuss this topic.
Yes, so I have continued listening to Grad School Femtoring, and a lot of the episodes, I'm caught up. I'm there every week. And a lot of the episodes, the guest speakers, and even if there's no guest speaker, a lot of the episodes really resonate with me. I would just hear these stories and I would be like, yes, I've experienced this firsthand. I'm glad I'm not alone. But a recent episode with Dr. Vanegas about her experience getting her PhD and going to grad school as an immigrant, I was listening to the story and I thought to myself, like, I don't resonate with this because I'm not an immigrant, but how come I still have like a third level type of like connection? Like, why is this hitting me emotionally still? And then I realized that in my job, I work with undocumented students at Cal State LA, and they share such similar stories. So when Dr. Vanegas was telling her story, that's when I realized, like, I have this connection when people share their immigration stories, even though I am not one. And I just wanted to show kind of like the humility and privilege I have being in this position for this community to really open up about their experiences, because I know that grad students, they conduct research or they might work part-time jobs with communities they don't identify with. So I just wanted to talk more about that.
Awesome. So I would that's great to hear that in listening to other episodes, there are some things that we can resonate with regardless of whether or not it's our own direct experience. And I would love to hear about the work that you do. So like you mentioned you're a programming assistant for the Dreamers Resource Center at Cal State LA. So if you could tell us a little bit about the center, about your role in it, and then after that, maybe a little bit of what kind of it's taught you thus far.
Yes, so I work at Cal State LA's Dreamers Resource Center. The Dreamers Center would not have been possible without our donor, who is Erica Glazer. She put down an endowment to ensure that the Cal State LA had a Dreamer Center for the undocumented students, because Dreamer Centers, they weren't really a thing until I want to say like mid 2010s when DACA was first created. And this wouldn't have happened if students who were undocumented at the time in Cal State LA really advocated that they needed a space and a community for resources, because their on-campus resources, they were not exactly catered to them. So for example, the Career Center, there's tons of jobs and internship opportunities, but a lot of the job postings do not clarify work status or work permit / citizenship status requirements. So it would be really common, even until like today, where students would see a job they're interested, then they apply just for them to get rejected because of their status. So it's really important that this space exists, especially with the very uncertain immigration issues that are going on here in the United States. So as the programming assistant, I do a lot of outreach, both within campus and off campus, with other academic departments and other Dreamer centers and immigration organizations across California. And I just like collect like resources and keep up with current events, just to ensure that when a student does come to the Dreamer Center, I have the right resources for them. And with my team, we are constantly thinking of programming and events that we can host, whether it's a scholarship workshop or a community gathering with our counselors from the counseling and psychological services, and ensuring that we're providing support for our students, whether it's academically, financially, or even emotionally, because we firmly believe that learning and just student life overall is not just inside the classroom. Like, there are so many opportunities and services that should be available for all students. And we know that due to national policy, undocumented students may feel limited. So we just want to be there for them. So that's my role, and I really enjoyed it a lot. It's been extremely rewarding.
One thing I forgot to ask you was, when did you start working for this position? Is this recent, or
Oh, I started working this position in January 2021, so just last
Oh, okay.
semester. Yeah, so at the time, it was all remote. So I was just working from home every
Oh,
single
that's
day.
true. You were
Yeah,
hired remotely, and you probably
yeah.
recently went back into the office or in person or
Yes.
hybrid, perhaps.
Yeah, so we are now fully open on campus, and just the shift from working remotely, I've noticed that when working remotely, students only reach out if they need something. But when you're open in person, students can just drop by the Dreamer Center and say like, hey, I'm just here to chill, I'm here to do homework. Or like, you just have to cater to them right away, instead of like thinking like, oh, the student emailed me, let me let me dedicate some time to like draft an email back. So really seeing the difference between working remotely and working in person with these students, like it's like day and night. It was definitely so different, but yeah, that's when I started, just like earlier this year.
Wow. Okay. That's useful to know in terms of the context when you started, and also that transition. It's a big transition to go from completely online. All you see is what's on the screen. Like you said, having to take your time to craft an email versus in person, helping them on the spot. And also just that there's a big difference in serving someone and feeling like you're in community with them when they're in person. Like you said, even just dropping by to say hi or dropping by to study, you're really like, you can feel like you're making a big difference, and you're providing support even without necessarily doing a big thing, but like having the space, like providing a space for folks. So that's really that's great. I'm glad that y'all have been able to make that transition, because I know a lot of different centers and departments and just folks working at universities are still in the middle trying to figure that out. I wanted to go back to the conversation about working with a population that is so, I would say, precarious, and then you use the language of being an ally. And so I wanted you to kind of talk a little bit more about why you chose to use the language of being an ally, and also what you've learned in the last, from January to October, 9-10 months that you've been doing this.
Yeah, so we use the term ally a lot at my work just because there are a lot of different types of immigrants. Although our center caters to specifically undocumented immigrants, we are well aware that there are immigrants who have advanced parole or like they have a green card or they're a legal resident. And we don't want to like just go in and classify each person based on their status. So we say like, if you're undocumented, you are welcome here. But if you're an ally willing to learn more, like you are invited to this space too. Because when people do come into our center, we don't ask for their citizenship status. So that's why we just tend to use either like you're an undocumented student or you're an ally, because the common goal is to really unite for immigration advocacy at Cal State LA.
Right. And another question I had, and I know I asked you to tell me a little bit about what you learned, but before you do that, so you said that sometimes you work or outreach, not just with folks and the population at Cal State LA, but also other programs across California. Are there any that you could name off the top of your head, just so that we can be aware of what other centers are available? I know when I was an undergrad, there was one at UCLA, but I quickly realized that that wasn't necessarily true at all universities. And also there's a difference in the type of support and the staffing and funding available across the different centers too. So that was something that I realized like early on. I was like, oh, like just because there is a center doesn't mean it's equipped in the same way. Like you said, you have an endowment. That's incredible. That's amazing. I wish every institution had that. So yeah, sorry, just going straight into it. Are there others that you could name off the top of your head?
No worries at all.
Yeah.
So we connect with a lot of resource centers or immigration nonprofits, but the one that I will elaborate on is called Grad Student LA, which stands for the Central American Resource Center. You do not have to be Central American to utilize their services, but Grad Student LA, we have a partnership with them, and there are other Cal States in Southern California who also have partnerships with them, such as Cal State Dominguez Hills and my alma mater, Cal State Fullerton, and a bunch of others. But students who are undocumented, they are able to get free legal services through Grad Student LA because attorneys are expensive. But if you're a student at selected universities in Southern California, you're able to get these services for free, and they're also available to your immediate family, and they're also available to alumni who graduated within the last 2 years. So that's one of our partnerships. Yeah.
That's awesome.
And
that's really good.
Yeah, we connect with other like organizations too, such as CHIRLA, which is the Coalition for Human Immigration Rights, I think, of Los Angeles. And then there's another really famous nonprofit called Immigrants Rising. They're based in, I believe, Sacramento, somewhere in Northern California, but they are like, they're really well known nationwide. So we have connections both at the local, the statewide, and the national level.
Nice. I'm writing these down, and I'll make sure, actually I'll include these in the show notes for this episode. And you're right, they're based in up north, San Francisco. Looking up immigrants.
Yeah.
Rising. Yeah. Okay, good. So I just want to make sure that we kind of put a name to some of the different resources available, because that this is actually one of my limitations as a podcaster. Like, you don't know everything and you don't know it all. And one of my privileges is that, I was born here, so I am a US citizen. And so I have been kind of less aware of the resources available for undocumented students kind of nationwide. I have learned the resources available at the institutions I've been affiliated with, but even then, like I myself have found myself to be frustrated in many ways, like kind of like how you're saying, where some programs, including the program that I worked for, McNair Scholars Program, is only available for US citizens and permanent residents. And I would always, every time there would be an info session, tell people clearly and upfront, like eligibility requirements, that unfortunately this is a federally funded program. This is a federal requirement and we cannot change it. But I would refer them to the other programs available on campus that they could apply for, including another one that we had in our office that was available to students regardless of immigration status. So anyway, I want to get back to you and you sharing what you've learned, because I'm here to listen and learn, and I want listeners to also listen and learn. And if there are folks who self-identify as, undocumented and want to learn a little bit more about what may be available to them outside of just kind of their institution or whatever space they're in, that it's just good to know kind of what you've learned thus far.
Yeah, of course. So I'm actually really glad that you shared more about your position, because I didn't even know that the McNair's program was only available to US citizens. So
Some
I didn't
programs,
know
what they
that.
do is they'll try to get funding and have like a similar program, or they'll mentor students on the side. They won't be official McNair scholars, but they'll mentor them on the side. And I've done that too, where I've taken on students and helped them, provide them with guidance, but they can't formally be admitted into the program and considered a McNair scholar and be eligible for things like the fee waivers that McNair scholars are eligible for. So it is incredibly frustrating. It is unfair, and it just happens to be a requirement of a federal program. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very common, like I had mentioned earlier, where students find an awesome program or a job and they're unable to even like apply or get a formal acceptance because of their status. And like you had said, I have the privilege that I am a US citizen, so I have an abundance of resources and opportunities on campus compared to those who are undocumented. So the cultural humility really hit me when we opened in person, because I started this position remotely. I was able to take my time when students reached out, and students only reached out if they needed something. Like they would set up a Zoom call or send an email if they had a question. But when opening in person, there were students who would come in just to relax, or if they had a question, you had to know on the spot. So that's when I realized that I still have a lot to learn in this position, which is totally okay. Like I know that when students would call our office or they would walk in person, they would ask me questions. And even though I know some of the basics of forms like the Dream Act, or like differences between like AB 540, sometimes students would have very complicated like cases that I just don't know how to handle. So I would always refer to my coordinator or my director on how to navigate this. And when this would happen a lot in the beginning of the semester, I would feel really guilty, and I would really question myself, like, what am I doing like in this position if I can't help them? And I would feel really helpless and guilty that I can't help them. But after talking to both my coordinator and my director, and even my fellow student leads, they've been really reassuring. So just having that really encouraging team has helped me a lot. And they've taught me how to give myself grace, because I'm only like 10 months into this position, and I have learned a lot over time, and I need to give myself credit for that. And also, I have to remember that I don't know this because I've never filled out a California Dream Act form myself. I have never applied to DACA. So, of course, I kind of had like a lot to learn, and I still do. So I just learned how to kind of like show that humility and know that it's not a reflection on me. I really want to like keep learning. I don't want to say I want to keep making mistakes, but I just know that once I make a mistake, I use the wrong word, I confuse a few forms, I just know that I do it once, I get corrected, and I can move on knowing that I'm not going to do that again. So it's really taught me a lot. And I have to share that before I applied for this position, I thought that the International Student Office and the Dreamer Center were like the same thing. So I assumed that like international students were undocumented and vice versa, but it turns out they're two completely different populations. So just like learning more because I feel like I wasn't the only one. And it turns out that I wasn't. So just learning more about this community each day really like teaches me a lot. And it's very like rewarding that my team and these students really are they really built that trust with me to share their stories, because they are much more than their citizenship status. They have like goals and ambitions just as big as any of their peers.
It's interesting that you mentioned that, because it's seeing an individual as a whole human, as more than just their status. And some individuals are in mixed status households too. Or I remember one of my close friends in undergrad, we were both English majors, and she was undocumented. And I remember, I think it was, I can't remember which sibling, but like some of her younger siblings were born here and she wasn't, and she was the one trying to go to college. And she would say, like, they don't realize how privileged they are. They don't realize like how many things would have been easier for them than they are for me, because when she was doing schooling, the DREAM Act wasn't available. So she would take a quarter off to work full time and then come back for a quarter and pay, and back and forth and back and forth. So it did take her a little longer to finish. But I'm thinking about that too, about how it is not just the responsibility of individuals who are undocumented to learn about these things. It's the responsibility of everybody, including those of us who are more privileged, to learn. And also, like you said, giving yourself kind of grace and compassion as you're learning, because it's your first time kind of navigating this. So long as you're putting in the work, kind of like how those of us have been striving to work towards learning more about anti-racism, and how to be an anti-racist, and how to support our like Black brothers and sisters, brown brothers and sisters. Like, it's a continuous kind of learning process. So I'm glad that you have had, I would say, even the privilege of serving these students and having this position, and the fact that you're continuously learning. And that was kind of the case for me too, when I was working for the institution. Is like constantly striving to learn and to refer people to kind of the right places. If you're not the one that knows the most, like you said, sometimes I have to refer people to the coordinator or the director. And actually, I'm going to have on the podcast I have two upcoming guests. One of them, I'm gonna try to schedule this person. I know that they got busy, talking about what it's like being undocumented and a grad student and not being able to travel to a location where you need to do field work. I'm like, that's really interesting to like study a population that you cannot necessarily go and like in person meet with them. And then another person is a former director of an undocumented student center. So I'm curious about their experience and what they'll share about that. So I feel like this is a continued conversation, and you're just getting it started on the podcast, but it's going to keep going. So hopefully you'll tune in for that as well.
I'm going to be looking out for those episodes.
I'm curious, in terms of your learning journey, what are some of the things that you have learned in your position that you're like, oh, I wish I would have learned, or it's really useful to have this perspective, or I'm like realizing sometimes when we learn things, like realizing some parts about our own privileges, or just things that kind of you've had the light shed on certain things that maybe you hadn't realized until now, until like you started the job or you started meeting people in person. So maybe some takeaways, learning lessons, or anything else that you think that would be helpful for someone else to know who maybe is privileged in that sense, where they are documented and have not had to worry about that.
Yeah, so I would say to keep practicing, because when I was working in person for the first time, I remember I was so scared of answering the phone, because my first couple of phone calls, I didn't know the answer. but how would I learn if I just kept avoiding the phone and just keep giving it to the rest of my team? Because like I like used the wrong term the first couple of times, but then the phone rang and I got nervous. But once I finally picked up and I was able to answer the question correctly, like that felt good. So just give yourself grace and keep learning. And like for me, I'm a visual learner, so when I was looking up like the information like DACA versus non-DACA and what's AB 540, like it's like I was studying for a class because I did have a lot to learn. So just keep practicing. And also I would say remember your why. Like why did you apply for this position in the first place? Because that will give you a gentle reminder of like, well, you really wanted this position and now you're here. Because my why was because I knew I wanted a career in social like justice. Like I want communication research or even like program evaluation roles in like social welfare settings, whether it's like a university or a nonprofit. And I want to specialize in diverse communities, because during my undergrad I did do a lot of volunteering and I have a lot of work experience, but I noticed that I kept volunteering with communities I identified with, which is not a bad thing. But when I started grad school, I was like, I need to branch out and learn more about other people besides Filipino-Americans, besides people with disabilities, because I knew that the advantage I had was I knew the culture because those were my identities too. So really showing that humility was really, it was a motivation for me to branch out. So when I saw the Dreamer Center was hiring, I was like, like this is very new to me, but if I'm going to call myself an intercultural communication scholar, I need to get over that bridge and really branch out. So I wanted to practice what I preached instead of just doing the research and like putting my name on like journals and conferences, because like I wanted to make sure I had that balance between community engagement and research. And I would say the last thing, for those who are interested in like community engagement with populations they don't identify with, is to take care of yourself too, because there can be really like heavy news and emotions that comes with this work. Like there is a DACA decision just last summer where new applications were barred, and I felt so helpless. I was like, I wish I can do more. And then I went to a point where I was like, am I doing enough in this position? Because I have the privilege where if I clock out, I'm done for the day. But undocumented students, this is their life. They don't get to clock out being undocumented. But just going back to what I said, keep practicing and keep remembering your why, and that'll give you the spark to just keep going. Because the fact that you're already opening yourself like, I want to do this, I want to work with these with this community. So I know that was a lot, but that's a lot I've learned and I'm still learning as I go.
I feel like I got a lot from that too. I was taking notes as you were speaking and thinking about everything that you said and how it resonates with me and with the work that I do. Because you said that the reason why you picked up this job or you applied is because you wanted to step out of your comfort zone and learn more about working with diverse populations. And last time we spoke, we talked about the importance of like learning to work with disabled students and accessibility. And I think there's that parallel of that social justice in general. Like, I think that's one thing that you and I have in common, is that we do prioritize social justice. And, I know when I started the podcast, I named the podcast like just kind of like in passing, like not even thinking about it, but because I wasn't gonna do this seriously when I did it. Like when I started the podcast, it was kind of like, oh, let me just test it out and see. I want to kind of learn about this new app, not thinking about it. But I was like, if I were to do a podcast, I would want it to be, expansive. I don't want it to be just for Latinx folks or just for, although I do prioritize first-gen students of color. So I do prioritize them, and it's called femtoring, which means privileging kind of my experience as someone who identifies as a woman and a woman of color and a Chicana and a feminist.
Yes.
But at the root of everything, hopefully it's something that other people can sense, is that I do prioritize at the core of everything is social justice before anything, is making sure that we are kind of shedding light on the experiences of different types of oppressed populations. And so just like you said, you don't get to clock out being undocumented. And what a privilege it is for us to do that, you know, to not necessarily have to learn about it if we don't want to. What a privilege it is to be able to clock out, you know, not being Black or brown if you're white, or what a privilege it is to be able to clock out kind of not being disabled and not having to worry about accessibility, because everything is catered to you. Even me being left-handed, sometimes I would get so frustrated going into classrooms, college classrooms, and seeing all these righty desks. You know,
I didn't even know you were left-handed. But yeah, there's so many little things like the doorknob or like the mouse. Yeah.
But there's so many ways and so many experiences that are oppressed, you know, and that's why I think some of us, we have this mission because we ourselves have been oppressed in some way, shape, or form. We ourselves have like intersectional identities in some way, shape, or form. And even though we don't inhabit all of the spaces of oppression, even though we have a lot to learn, it's still important. I feel a little self-conscious even with this topic too, because I'm like, I know I'm not an expert on this, but I think it's important. And I'm glad that you came in again to get this conversation started, and hopefully it will spark more conversations, and hopefully we will all continue to learn. So I thank you for coming back on and sharing these gems and what you've learned, and you know why this work is important, and why more folks should also kind of strive to get involved in the advocacy work, in learning and serving these populations, because you never know who might be next to you and might be struggling with this.
Yeah, that's what I learned along the way too. Like, especially if you want a career in higher education, whether you're a professor or even working in student affairs, you don't know. And just imagine if you say something like something I noticed when I first started grad school, professors, they would say, go vote if you're able. But when I would go on like social media, people would be like, vote, like just go out there and vote. But then
that was making you feel bad. Like, why aren't you voting? It's like,
yeah. So that's what this position has taught me like a lot of. And it's like, if I do get another role in higher education, that's more catered to the entire campus. Like, for example, let's say I get a job at like a university library. It's like, I don't know who's undocumented. I don't know who's LGBTQ unless they have that, you know, that trust to open up with me. So instead of making those assumptions, really being careful with like how I communicate. So this job was really a great, like, it's still a great like eye opener to me.
Yeah. Thank you for talking about it. And I there are so many stereotypes, you know, with any population, is like, you know, any oppressed population is that they look a certain way or they behave a certain way. And there's so much complexity and diversity even among the different populations that it's good to never make assumptions, or try our best, because I think sometimes we can't help but make connections, but try our best not to make assumptions, especially negative assumptions, and to give people the benefit of the doubt. So anytime I work with folks, I try to give them grace, because I don't know what's going on. So if they're late, I have no idea. If they don't show up, I have no idea what's going on. Instead of thinking, oh, this person's being disrespectful or not mindful of my time or whatever it is, it's like we have no idea. And sometimes folks are not in the space or the position, or don't feel safe or secure to be able to disclose what's going on, you know, with them.
Yeah.
Any last thoughts? I think we're getting ready to wrap up. After this, I'll be asking you how others, just a reminder how others can reach you. But any other last minute thoughts before you tell us about your different social media handles?
Last thoughts. That's hard. I would say, shout out to my workplace, Cal State LA Dreamer Center.
Yes.
You have all taught me so much, and I'm still learning a lot.
Can I just say I love Cal State LA? I haven't like been a student or a staff or a professor or anything like that, but I've gone there. I was invited to give a book talk for the Chicana Mother Work Anthology. And OMG, the students there, beautiful, beautiful Black, brown students in the audience, so receptive, so engaging. It felt like I was given a big, tight hug. And ever since I stepped foot on that campus, I was like, this is why there's some amazing people. I know some professors at Cal State LA, particularly in Chicanic studies, and they're incredible human beings. So I'm just like, you're in a great space. I just want to kind of give a special shout out to Cal State LA and send my love to Cal State LA, because y'all, you have good folks there, including you.
Thank you. I'm just so like humbled, and it's just been such a rewarding job position, and I can't wait to just continue it until I graduate in spring and I have to let the position go. But just a huge thank you, and just one of my favorite quotes that about the undocumented community that I just keep reiterating is, no dreamer is too small and no dream is too big. So I wanted to put that out there, like just regardless of citizenship status, just know that Cal State LA or any other Dreamer Center or organization, like they are here for you. We are here to, redirect your path, no matter what your professional goals. I promise there are options for you. And for those who want to be like an ally with any community that you don't identify with, just having that spark of interest, that's already the first step. The fact that you're going to open yourself to a community and to really like welcome yourself, you're already taking the first step with that kind of passion. It's a never-ending process. I'm definitely not an expert ally, but I really do reiterate like the balance of community engagement and like research and scholarship with these communities. So yeah, just keep up the great work.
Thank you, Emeline. And just last thing, I know I asked you this last time, but for folks who didn't get to listen to the episode that you were on last time, how can others reach you if they resonated with what you said and they'd like to connect in some way? What's the best way to reach you?
Yeah, the best way to reach me is through my Instagram. My username is mbeeze, EMBEEEZE. But I also encourage you to follow Cal State LA's Dreamer Center, which is Cal State LA Dreamers on Instagram. We're really responsive. Usually half the time it's me replying to those DMs anyway. And
I'll tag you both.
Yeah, connect with me twice, and I'll just like reply twice. Our programming is virtual, so that means that no matter where you are welcome to join our events. We recently celebrated the 20th anniversary of AB 540 on Monday, and we had people from San Francisco, San Diego, Orange County logging in. So we really want to just keep fostering that community. You don't have to be from like Cal State LA or LA in general to be involved with us. So yeah, connect with either of us there, even though they're kind of both just me. But yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on again, and maybe we'll see you another time too.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for joining me in the Grad School Femtoring podcast. If you liked what you heard, please rate this podcast on iTunes, Spotify, or anywhere you tune in. You can also support the podcast by donating to my Patreon page, Anchor page, or Venmo account, which is at Grad School Femtoring. If you have questions or episode topics, you can contact me by sending me a DM on Instagram, sending me an email to gradschoolfemtoring@gmail.com, sending me a voice message on Anchor, or sending me a message via my personal website at YvetteMartinezvu.com. Until next time.